Live from Emerson College in beautiful downtown Boston, this is the Jeff Santos Show. Rebuilding America, together, investing, activism, and supporting the middle class. Now,
the progressive, populist voice of politics.
Here's Jeff.
Good afternoon, Americans, and welcome to the Jeff Santos Show. We are live in Studio A on the campus of Emerson College. Hope you had a great Independence Day, had a chance to spend some time with family, friends, and maybe a hot dog, hamburger, and some beach time. All good here. Had a great time myself. We got a great show today. We're going to talk a little bit about, well, no indictment for Hillary Clinton. What does it mean? John Nichols will be our first guest at The Nation magazine at 4 p.m., coming up in a few minutes. We'll also to have the discussion with Mark Taylor-Canfield, that great independent journalist out of the great state of Washington and the great metropolitan area of Seattle. Coming up at 5 o'clock, good friend Robert Craig, Wisconsin Citizen Action. He's the executive director. He'll talk with us for the entire hour. And at 5:30, special treat for those of you who are Bernie Sanders supporters. Our good friend Bruce Carter, Black Men for Bernie, will join us at 5:30 to 6 o'clock. We'll take your phone calls, of course, at 772-925-8206. I am being told that we will have our old number, 800 number, back by the end of July. Keeping my fingers crossed. We'll see on that. That, of course, is the 3 Santos number, 844-3 We'll look forward to having that go live by August 1st, if not sooner. Email me, Jeff at revolutionboston.com. Of course, you can tweet and post on Facebook at Jeff Santos Show. Of course, Sarah Billingsley doing all the great work there, monitoring everything. Well, let me just say a couple of things here about the indictment, or lack of indictment. I got to watch the press conference today with Mr. Comey, who I thought was very forceful in his acknowledgement of what was going on. I thought he did a very good presentation, but I thought all of the evidence that he put forward would result in some sort of indictment, but apparently not. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't enough evidence to convict, and to do this in the middle of a campaign, which would be somewhat unprecedented. And I'm beginning to think that it would be very hard to get, not only a conviction, but to be able to put this situation through the Democratic and Republican face-off, if you might. That being said, what about the Clinton Foundation? As Bernie Sanders said, I'm sick and tired of your damn emails. What about the foundation and the work that was done between the State Department, which we know had a kind of a leaky sieve kind of role when it comes to intelligence and when it comes to, everybody getting what they want? I have a feeling that is not yet been fully investigated. Now, whether the Republican Congress, and you can say that this would be a witch hunt, maybe it might be, could find something, but this to me is problematic, and it's problematic for any president and any candidate. And of course, this is rather unique because what you have is a wife of a former president who has his own foundation. Not necessarily the most average, normal situation. Back in a flash. It's time to go west. Pacific Northwest, that is, to the great city of Seattle. And by the way, since Mr. Durant went from Oklahoma to Golden State, he should have been in Seattle. He should never have lost the Supersonics. And maybe he would have stayed on the West Coast. Just think about that for a second, folks. All right, our next guest, as you heard, the music is the great independent journalist. You see him in Daily Coast. You read him there. And you hear him here on the Jeff Santos Show and watch him on FSTV here on the program. It is time to speak to Mr. Mark Taylor-Canfield. Mark, happy Tuesday, sir. How are you?
I'm good, Jeff. How are you doing? I just celebrated the 4th of July in Seattle with a huge fireworks celebration, but I wanted folks to know that I posted a new piece at Daily Coast about independence and what it means and what the Bill of Rights means and why freedom of the press is so important in the United States. So I felt like that was my way of celebrating Independence Day and the 4th of July, was to write an article about freedom of the press, which I think is really important. This country was one of the first countries to actually, if not the first country, to actually establish freedom of religion and freedom of the press in its own constitution. So we have a lot to live up to, and we need to do better, much better.
Certainly do. We're going to also post it on our own website at jeffsantoshow.com and revolutionradionetwork.com over the next 24 hours. But we'll get to that in a second. But obviously the news of the day emanating from the East Coast and the media establishment, and some are saying, well, that issue is done. We don't have to cover that anymore. That is, of course, the no on indictment by the FBI director, Mr. Comey, who, of course, is a Republican. Coming just days after the famous meeting or infamous meeting between Bill Clinton and Attorney General Lynch on the tarmac of a Phoenix airport. 8 days later, and now just a few minutes ago, seeing Hillary Clinton and President Obama on the same day campaigning. There is a lot of skepticism, not only amongst myself and the audience that we have, Mark, but I think a lot of people in general are going to be wondering, was this a fix? Was this all rigged? Was this basically, you're not going to fool around with the Democratic nominee. You're not going to hold up the election because of an email scandal. And I think there's a lot of smoke there. Maybe there's not any fire, but there's a lot of smoke. Your view on today's happenings in Washington, D.C.?
Well, things are happening so fast that it's been really difficult to keep track of and do independent, in-depth analysis, because the pieces on the game board keep changing so quickly overnight. This is something that a lot of people that I spoke to in the field of journalism expected, because there is a cynical sense that, hey, this is politics. Now, I have no evidence that the FBI was playing politics or that the Justice Department was playing politics. What we're talking about here is the appearance. And that's always been the problem, is the perception, especially this perception that Hillary Clinton, who, is looking to become part of this dynasty, this Clinton dynasty in the United States, that she is somehow the new Teflon candidate, because she doesn't seem to be obligated to follow rules that other people follow. She seems to be able to get away with things that other folks can't. And it just leaves this impression that basically she's untouchable because of her political power. And that's not really a great image to be portraying during this election season, when a lot of political consultants are saying that this is the year of the independent, this is the year of the underdog. So not really the best face of a campaign when you're running in 2016 in the United States, when people are already skeptical of the media, of the elections, of the candidates themselves. I mean, it's not going to help the Hillary Clinton campaign, regardless of whether there was an indictment or not. That's pretty clear.
Yeah, no doubt. Talking with Mark Taylor-Canfield here on the Jeff Santos Show I posed this question to our good friend John Nichols just a few minutes ago, Mark, and let me pose it to you. I think what this does is it really hurts any kind of momentum, particularly if you don't choose a Bernie Sanders or an Elizabeth Warren, and maybe Sherrod Brown, although I don't think he carries the same weight that the other two do in terms of reform, in terms of personal ethics, in terms of being the outsider in this underdog independent year. Because I believe that if they choose another senator, a Wall Street former mayor and Cory Booker, kind of go along to get along, former governor and former Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, or Mr. Castro, who is, of course, kind of unproven, unknown, and now HUD secretary, former mayor of San Antonio. I just worry about the fact that if you are, running as a progressive, and you're the nominee, whether you're running in Seattle for McDermott's seat, as some of our friends are, or whether you're running in the seat of, say, Alan Grayson in Florida, it's very hard to say, or very hard to fight back, that, if I am more ethical, then I am different than the nominee of the Democratic Party. Your view on this and what it means for those progressive Democrats and Democrats running as a whole, if their candidate still has that question of whether she's telling the truth or not.
Well, this is particularly an issue in Washington state where the majority of the Democrats did vote for Bernie Sanders during the caucus, but we have these superdelegates who are supporting Hillary Clinton. It's a very confusing situation, Jeff, and I think there's going to be a big fight over the platform on issues like this. But Pramila Jayapal is running for Jim McDermott's seat here in Washington state, and she's got a lot of populist progressive support. She obviously doesn't support Hillary Clinton. She is more in the Bernie Sanders wing of the Democratic Party, and that is the future of Washington state, and that's where the new candidates are coming from, and that's where the new enthusiasm and the new votes are coming from. If the party is moving in a different direction, and especially if they choose a VP that doesn't represent these progressive views, it's just going to further challenge people's sensibilities in Washington state who have been participating in the Democratic Party and make them wonder whether this is the party that they should be involved with. I think this platform issue is going to be a huge battle. And I was really moved, actually, to hear what Dr. Cornel West said, who, by the way, I consider to be one of my mentors and who I've met with several times and has been on his program on NPR. He has really inspired me in the past in terms of his, political stance. But I also had challenged him at times for supporting Obama so much. And, he admitted on the air that the Obama administration deserved some critique. But now we have a situation where
he's been critical for a while now, too.
Yes, now he's saying to the Democratic National Committee, this is ridiculous. I cannot ethically, stand behind a party that supports the TPP and won't ban fracking. And also the Bernie Sanders delegates are very upset about these issues, and they want to move this battle right to the floor of the convention. And now we have a situation where Bernie Sanders has, regardless, I think, of what Hillary Clinton has said, I think she definitely had to move on the TPP issue more towards the stance of the Bernie Sanders crowd. Now, if the platform ends up endorsing the TPP, now you have two candidates running in the same party who disagree with the platform and the DNC. So that's ridiculous. I mean, the party really needs to get its act together on some of these issues.
You get that right.
Now that the indictment issue might, be left alone for a while, although there are still a lot of questions, as you said, the next big battle is going to be this platform issue, because a lot of Democrats in Washington state are saying, are you effing kidding me? Fracking, TPP, is this the party we want to be associated with? And also the $15 an hour minimum wage, which of course is really big and has been passed in Seattle. That's another issue that people here really want to see on the platform. So there's going to be a huge battle. This is amazing what's coming up in Philadelphia.
Yeah, no, it's going to be great. We're looking forward to being there. We're looking forward to meeting you for the first time as well, Mark. Coming up on Thursday, and we'll confirm this tomorrow, but we are scheduled to have Dr. Jill Stein on the program with us. And if Bernie Sanders, and it looks, unfortunately, after today's news, that Hillary Clinton indeed will get the nod. Even though I believe, again, that the drip, drip, drip could cause a lot of problems for the Democratic Party, and they should think about that in their decision between Sanders and Clinton. But this, I think, will give them the ability to sort of just, push her along down the line and give her the nomination. After all, she does have more votes. But I believe, Mark, that there is a major problem. For the Democratic Party, if Bernie Sanders voters are given a middle finger, Dr. Stein, Jill Stein, will get a lot of those voters. And that is not a good thing for the Democratic Party, but it may be a very good thing for the country. Your thoughts on this? Because there's a need, in my opinion, for a third, a fourth, maybe even a fifth party. A lot of European countries do it and do it very well. You have the Greens working with Miss Merkel in Germany, and that's been very productive for a long time. I'm not saying they're perfect by any stretch, but they do a lot of good things in Deutschland. And it's worked even in Britain with the Liberal Party and the Conservatives working together. Now, the Liberal Party is more sort of a Hillary Clinton-esque, party in the UK, as you know. But all that being said, how do you view what could come out of these next couple of weeks? And maybe it affects, the Libertarian Party and the Green Party.
This is a very controversial subject, especially if you try to talk to folks in the Democratic Party, and it's caused a stir at Daily Kos before when I've talked about Jill Stein and the Greens, and criticized the Democrats and the Republicans for controlling the election primaries in most of the electoral system in the United States. So I have, spoken with Jill Stein. I've known her for years. She's somebody that has her heart in the right place and is interested in leadership because she thinks she has something to offer and that the country needs it, not because of her ego or some money-making scheme that she has with some foundation. She,
right.
As they say in New York, I'm not saying, I'm just saying, right? But she does represent what I said all along is that the Bernie Sanders platform, if you want to call it that, his campaign platform is actually much closer, I think, and much more aligned with the Green Party than it is the Democratic Party. It has been since the beginning. The problem is that the Green Party has had a really difficult time raising money, of course, because they don't get corporate sponsorship. They have to organize in all 50 states. It's very difficult. You have to collect signatures in all 50 states. You have to pay the fees to get your candidate on the ballot in all 50 states. They've had a difficult time. They have been able to get Jill Stein on the ballot in all 50 states, but launching that kind of a national campaign takes a lot of staff and a lot of money and a lot of enthusiasm, the kind of thing that Bernie Sanders had this year and still has actually in his campaign. If those people and that kind of energy were to go to the Green Party, I mean, there's no telling what the potential is there. But just a reality check here too, Jeff. I just, despite the corporate media spin, we have to remember that it's 2,383 delegates to clinch the nomination. Neither Bernie Sanders nor Hillary Clinton have that many. The media reports and the people from the Democratic leadership are talking about, quote, unpledged superdelegates to put her over the top. So we have to remember that.
There's no doubt. And, what we have here, in my opinion, is a flawed system that needs to be corrected. There is a rigged system, particularly when Debbie Wasserman Schultz is the rigger after being a longtime supporter and stayed with Secretary Clinton all the way to the end in 2008. So there's a lot of problems here. Let me ask you, do you think that the people in Seattle that you talk to that see the middle finger being in their face from Senators Murray and Cantwell, from the leadership in the Democratic Party as a whole in Washington State, and does that make them flock that much faster to a Jill Stein, or maybe if they were independents to start with, and maybe they even look at a Gary Johnson if they're a little bit more middle of the road than, say, the Greens are, and Gary Johnson and, of course, the Libertarian Party. What do you make of that?
Well, it is true that if the leadership in Washington State continues to work in the corporate wing of the Democratic Party, that the majority of Democrats in the state are not going to see that as real representation, because that doesn't represent really what's happening in the state. I'm not saying that there aren't a lot of big money connections in Washington. Obviously, there are between Boeing, Microsoft, Amazon, and these huge corporations. Sure. But it does seem like the grassroots, at least in Washington State, are much more in the Bernie Sanders camp. If the leadership doesn't recognize that, then all I can say right now, Jeff, is that they're going to face challengers and be primaried. And if they, I don't know what's going to happen with the electorate at that point. There does seem to be a big shift. If people want to leave the Democratic Party, they're definitely going to be more likely to do that if the leadership in Washington State, at least, doesn't support Bernie Sanders. I mean, it just leaves them feeling as if they're fighting their own party, much like I've seen with the Bernie Sanders campaign. It's too bad when you're involved in a party where you're not, you can't even be sure whether the results are accurate. I mean, as a journalist, with all of the dropped votes in New York and California, I cannot say honestly that I believe the vote counts are accurate and that Hillary Clinton has actually won more delegates. I cannot say that. There's too many votes that were uncounted. There's too much suppression of votes. And apparently it even happened in Washington State, my own, glorious state that I thought was immune from this. Apparently, according to a Democratic activist, David Spring, there were votes here that were not counted for Bernie Sanders. They were provisional ballots, once again, that were set aside and never counted. So, and he was saying that... Well, if
you can look at New York and California, you get the first and third largest states in the country, and both of them had major problems. And you get very little evidence, very little, discussion by their board of elections, whether it's in New York City or in L.A. or in the state of California. And that, to me, says it right there. I mean, they're not in any rush to reform. And these are the Democrats. We all know about the voting repression that the Republicans will bring us through and how they stole the election in 2000 in Florida and 2004 in Ohio. I mean, this is supposed to be, the Republicans' way of winning, not the Democratic way. And that's why I think that this presents so many more problems, for the Democratic Party by choosing Hillary. And again, if she doesn't give I think, an olive branch to the left, and whether that's in the form and shape of Elizabeth Warren as a VP, and working with Bernie Sanders, people are going to stay home, or they're going to vote for people like Gary Johnson and Jill Stein. I don't think there's much evidence to say that they won't. I mean, these people got engaged in the middle of winter in a lot of cases, in February and March, and in certain parts of the country, it's pretty damn cold. I think that they're going to continue that enthusiasm, whether it's, again, a Stein or a Johnson, or maybe even writing in a Bernie Sanders. Your view on that?
Well, there's a problem in states like Washington where if the write-in candidate actually has to be registered as a write-in candidate for it to count, which seems counterintuitive, but I'll have to look into that. That scenario has been brought up a lot in my conversations with people. I was thinking, Bernie Sanders is a very authentic candidate. He's proven that you can, even during this corrupt time, run an authentic campaign and do very, very well beyond, belief, beyond expectation with individual contributions. The thing is that it was also a test for the Democratic Party. If you're going to run an authentic candidate like that in the Democratic Party, it also opened a lot of people's eyes to some of the problems within, the Democrats, the Democratic establishment, which wasn't really out there on the top of people's lists, to talk about, because we were so busy talking about corruption in the Republican Party. As far as Jill Stein and the third parties, I think that the two-party system is cracking right now, and it's showing that its lack of ability to represent the majority of people in the country. How the voters are going to react to that at this point, I can't really say. It's very unpredictable. There are a lot of people in the Bernie Sanders campaign that are not happy with the Democrats. Some of them have already told me that they don't know what to do. The interesting thing, Jeff, is that Republicans are also telling me the same thing. They don't. I've talked to local business people saying, I can't vote for Donald Trump. I'm a lifelong Republican. I can't vote for Donald Trump. I can't vote for Hillary Clinton. What do I do?
Yeah, well, here's something. I mean, I don't know if Jill Stein and Gary Johnson would come on my show, but I would invite both of them to come on, because I think when you look at the polls that show both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump unfavorability numbers, which are skyrocketing, and then what happened today in Washington is only going to, I think, enhance the negative view, particularly of independent voters. I mean, if you're not a hard-nosed Democrat or a hard-nosed Republican, and there are, 43% of the voters today are independents in the country, I think you have a very good chance for both of those candidates to be on stage for the debates. And who knows, Ross Perot, granted he had his own money and so forth, a little different than both Stein and Johnson, but he got 20% in 1992, and that's after dropping out and coming back in again. Who knows if he would have stayed in the whole time? He might have been closer to 30% and might have made even a bigger impact. Your view on that?
John Anderson ran as an independent and also polled very well. Right now, the discussion that I've had recently with folks in my own community is what would happen if some candidate were able to come along, an independent, and were able to attract all of those disaffected voters from the Republican Party who can't vote for Donald Trump, and all of those disaffected voters from the Democratic Party who can't vote for Hillary Clinton. Look at the percentages. That could be a winning ticket.
Sure. I mean, I believe Bill Clinton won in 1992 with 43% of the vote. 43.
There are a lot of people in both parties who are looking for an alternative. We're not talking just about independents. We're talking about lifelong members of these parties.
Sure.
Are looking for an alternative outside their own party right now today. Right. And most of them don't think that there's an option. They would like one. Do you feel like I really believe today, Jeff, maybe you could do it. I'm serious. Somebody can take these people. Somebody can take these votes. People are desperate for an alternative.
I guess maybe that gives me a chance then, if they're not that picky.
I'm saying Republicans are telling me that they would vote for Jill Stein just as a protest vote. I'm talking about there's a huge. I think you're exactly right.
Mark, we got to obviously continue this discussion next week. Fascinating stuff. Check out Daily Kos. Get a great article, does Mark, on the issue of freedom of the press and how we rank. Not very high to those who rank the media, and we have some major problems. We'll talk to Mark Taylor-Canfield next week about it. Mark, all the best. Have yourself a great week.
You too, Jeff. Always a pleasure. See you all next week.
See you then. We'll be right back. It's the Jeff Santos Show.
Some of you, I don't know if you watched, I gave a speech last Thursday. We live streamed the speech. And one of the things that I asked of people is I said, look, we need to have good people participating in politics at every level, from the school board on up. We had no idea how many people would respond to that call. And it went out, we said, please get back to berniesanders.com/win, W-I-N. You know what? 20,000 people in the last week responded. That's right. And these were, I think, mostly people who were prepared to run for office, and others who said, well, I don't want to run, but I want to help people in my community run for office. So let's talk about that one for a moment. And let me start off with a confession. I ran for mayor of the city of Burlington, Vermont in 1981. If I had known how little I knew about municipal government, I never would have run. But I was arrogant and cocky, and I ran. And I won by 10 votes. And I had a very steep learning curve, let me tell you. All right, but here is the point. And by the way, my experience in municipal government before that is I went to one city council meeting and I fell asleep at the meeting. It was the most boring meeting I ever saw in my life. Sure, I fell asleep. That was my whole experience in city government. But I was too dumb to know any better, and I actually ran for office. So my point is I have talked to people. You know, I've talked to a lot of people. People say, well, yes, it's true. I have a PhD in education. I've read 18,000 books. I don't think I'm prepared to serve on the school board. I don't know enough. We got to get over that. You got to get over that. All right? You know, nobody knows everything. Trust me. I'm a United States Senator. I can confirm that. Nobody knows everything. Many of my colleagues know a lot less than you would think. But, all right. But here's the point. You can learn, and there are a lot of other great people there to help you. You can't be intimidated. One of the things the system does in so many ways is it intimidates us and tells us we can't do that. So what we need is people to be standing up, running for school board, and we need other people to be helping them win. And we need people to be running for city council, for mayor, you know, for state legislature. We need good people with strong progressive ideas. And we are prepared to try to help you. And we have millions and millions of names. One of the things that we're doing right now is we have given support to a number, can't remember exactly how many, but a number of candidates running for Congress, running for state legislature. We help them raise money. We're giving them some help. That's one, and many others. And we are providing them the support they need to win. We want to help you also. So I would hope that people here will give real thought to figure out, you know, everybody, you know, has a different interest. Some of you may be interested in education, others, you know, in city politics or whatever it may be, city government. But think about the role that you can play and jump into it and ask your friends and family to help you. It doesn't, you know, especially at lower levels, doesn't take a whole lot of money to do that. Doesn't take a whole lot of expertise. You're smart, you can learn that stuff. How you get on the ballot, how you knock on doors, the kind of literature you need, the kind of website that you need, you can figure those things out. But my message today is that we need all over this country thousands and thousands of good people to jump into the political process, and we are prepared to try to work with you to make that happen. Okay?